Strange demonic companions, and how I write my sidekick for the hero. All of that and more, so let's jump in. Well, hello everybody. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. It's extremely hot in the UK, which isn't something you say every day. But it promises to be a scorching summer, fingers crossed, so far. And speaking of scorching and fiery things, I wanted to talk to you today about the companion which I created for my hero Fen. And this is a 12-year-old girl called Hessa. And she is an orphan who lives on the streets. She was taken in as a baby, found on the steps of a church. Pretty standard stuff so far. She was cared for and raised and fed and clothed and educated to a point by the three sisters who lived and worshipped at the church, at the Solaris as it's called. And they taught her a lot about Sol and the battle with her brother Loon, why we worship the sun, why the people of the land should be grateful to Sol. They encouraged her to be a very empathic person, to be very kind, to be very selfless, and they nurtured her basically. And unfortunately, as is sometimes the case, eventually the sisters started to pass away. They were already fairly elderly when they found Hessa as a child, and sort of 11 and a bit years later, they started to pass away until they were all gone. And Hessa found herself a bit sort of out on a limb. And the town where the book is set, the town was very much of the opinion that they didn't really kind of know what to do with her particularly. Her parents and her lineage were completely unknown, despite people's best efforts. But of course, one of the things, the crucial things that stopped them and made them gave them pause for thought was the fact that this girl, this 12-year-old girl, had the appearance of what could only be described as an imp of sorts, a demonic imp, if you will, as red as the fires of hell. And she has red skin and black hair, two little black horns, yellow eyes, little black freckles on her face, and she gives off this very sort of mischievous and playful kind of character, as a lot of young girls do. Basically, they like to be mischievous and they like to get into trouble, as a lot of children do. And I really enjoyed sort of playing around with this character's mischievous nature, getting herself into all sorts of trouble, and actually feeding off that trouble and that controversy which she generates just sort of by being around. And the town very much tried their best with her, but I think as she grew a little bit older and she got to sort of 12 years old, her rebellious streak was starting to form. She rejected a lot of authority, and the town tried to, once the sisters had passed, the town tried to house her with other people. It ended up going horribly wrong. She would get into lots of trouble. She would steal, lots of petty theft, and and it all accumulated really, and quite tragically in the town just forgetting her. They just forgot. They forgot about her. They kind of didn't care, didn't want to care, became distracted with other things, and went about their lives. And Hesse filtered down through the cracks and joined some of the other members of the town who found themselves down on their luck, homeless, dispossessed effectively, and the forgotten people in that sort of mini society. And when we pick up with her in the book, she is up to her usual tricks, attempting to negotiate with one of the merchants for some food, while brazenly not actually making any overtures about negotiating, and instead just happening to find an apple in her hand completely by accident, which unfortunately would now mean that she'd have to eat. Which, of course, as you can imagine, drew the ire of the merchant who gives chase. So she manages to, without spoiling it too much, she manages to scale up the building to escape him. This sort of this fat old man, and tucks into her apple before crawling into the eaves of the tavern to see what's going on. So one of the tenets of creating this character was that there had to be a mischievous side to her. There had to be a curious side to her because that's what children are. They're just constantly curious. They're like a sponge. They need to soak up information constantly. They need to ask questions all of the time. So I very much wanted Hessa to be that kind of typical child who's learning and growing, making mistakes, and also getting herself into trouble. That's kind of what children do. That's their modus operandi. So she's very much the inquiring mind, the inquisitive mind. Whereas when she meets Fen, she is treated pretty much in a similar way that the rest of the town treated her by Fen, which is to say, I haven't really got time for you. And in fact, we learn that her nickname that the town gives her is the Wasp. Very irritating, buzzing around all of the time, getting in people's way, and just needs to be swatted. And she cultivates that name, she cultivates that reputation almost, and she kind of runs with it. Well, if I'm going to be the Wasp, I'm going to act like a wasp. If I will play the role they have me play. So that's where you end up with this curious combination of a darkling and a wasp. And between them, they become embroiled in some very serious matters indeed. But one of the reasons I enjoyed writing it was because so much of what Fen does lacks a moral compass. Or at least he does have one, but it's very skewed. It's coloured very much by his past experiences. Born in born in a land of dark, perpetual night and darkness, raised on violence and death, and he's trying to learn. He's better than he used to be. He's been on this side for nearly 20 years, but he still hasn't quite got it. If it was a tangible thing that you could pick off a shelf, he still hasn't quite got it. Hasn't quite got love or friendship or loyalty or kindness or empathy or anything like that. It's very much a passing thing for him. It's something that sometimes he tries, he doesn't always get right, and he learns from the experience. At least he likes to think he does. But he's also quick to temper, judgmental, impatient, impetuous, and in a sense, he has a kind of desire to keep going. And Hesse sees this and thinks, right, I see myself here, I see an opportunity to join him and escape this awful place, this place that hasn't treated me very well over the years, this place who's kind of forgotten about me and abandoned me and thinks of me as nothing more than a nuisance. And she gravitates towards Fen. She gravitates to him for other reasons, which I won't go into without spoiling the book too much, but she definitely feels a connection to him. And so she tries her level best to ingratiate herself with this strange darkling, to look at me kind of approach, look how great I am, look how much I can help you. We could be a great team. And of course, Fen's having absolutely none of it. Much to Hessa's annoyance. But as with most children, she stomps and gets angry because she can't get her own way. And there's a lot of toing and froing with them on that. But primarily, I think I wanted a foil for Fen. I wanted an emotional foil for Fen. So much of what the hero has to learn is done through reflection, reacting emotionally to something, making a decision that is based on an emotional trigger or a feeling of some kind, which causes him to do something or react in a certain way. Hessa is that mirror. Hessa is that kind of, why did you do that? Why does it make you feel like that? Do you not think there's a better way? that constant self-analysis that Fen fails so often to do and just carries on blindly, Hessa's there to provide that emotional support, but also someone to hold him to account, because she's lived on this on the in the land of light, on this side of the glimpses for her entire life. She grew up initially around people who loved her very much, and was then abandoned. So she has had to learn humility. She's had to learn to rely on the kindness of strangers. She's had a very, very different life to Fen, but between the two of them, they can get something out of it. They actually can extract some value from having that connection. And Fen doesn't necessarily know it. He doesn't really realize or appreciate what she can actually do for him. And it remains to be seen as the book goes on as to whether or not they do eventually form something more meaningful, and whether or not that's something that's a long-term relationship that they'll both go through. So it was very challenging to create, but a lot of fun as well, because I used Hessa to force Fen into facing things, force him and hold him to account for his own feelings and his own emotions. Hessa is those checks and balances, in a sense. And she makes plenty of mistakes on her own, but she is very much guided by something that's bigger than her. Call it a higher power or a higher purpose, whatever it is. She's definitely guided by something like that. And as the story goes on, Fen starts to realize that we're not just talking about a little girl who's just making mischief for herself and trying to be a troublemaker. There might be something more to it. She seems to have a far older head on her shoulders than you might first imagine, even if it is a strange and crazy looking head indeed, with red face and black horns. Although she's not got a tail, I want to make that perfectly clear. I thought that was a bit too obvious. So she doesn't have a tail. In every other way, she's just a 12-year-old girl, innocent, mischievous, troublemaker, always wanting to learn, inquisitive, curious mind, bit of a brat sometimes, likes to think she can manipulate other people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, that's kind of Hessa basically, and I think a lot of the book ends up orbiting those two people, those two characters, because so much of what Fen does is driven by a desire to perhaps protect her, where he starts to understand why that's a good thing. He starts to understand the value that might come from that. And also because he feels that maybe he has a connection to Hessa as well, and he hasn't quite worked that bit out yet. So, yes, I hope you enjoy reading her interactions with Fen and the duopoly that creates. This team, basically, that creates of sort of them versus the world, as much as I had actually writing her. So, quick update on the book. The title of the book is The Darkling and the Wasp, in case you hadn't already worked that out. That was a little hint I did earlier on. I think it's sufficiently obvious. It kind of does what it says on the tin. But also, it's got a nice quirky title to it that makes people think, that sounds quite interesting. So thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hoping to do a new video soon on updating the editing process and where that's up to, and start touching on cover design and where I am with potential publishers. I'll also be sharing some excerpts from my query letter that I'll be sending out, encouraging everybody for some feedback and see what they think. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.